Welcome to another episode of Focus on Taekwondo. I'm the host and founder of this podcast, Mark Russell. Have you ever wondered what it takes to get your black belt, win a tournament, perfect a poomsae, or defend yourself in the street? Well, here at Focus on Taekwondo, we intend to help you find those answers. We interview top professionals in their field, including masters, athletes and coaches, to give you an insight into what it takes for you to be the best you can be at this modern day, ancient global martial art and sport that is Taekwondo. Okay, so today's interview is with Carl Evans. Hi, Carl.
Hi, you okay?
Yeah, good, thanks. Hi. So your job currently is you're the head of strength and conditioning at Liverpool John Moores University. You're also a sports and exercise scientist there too. So obviously today's interview is going to be mostly about strength and conditioning and physiology for Taekwondo, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. So ask away, any questions?
Excellent, okay. So you're currently doing a PhD as well, part-time, and that's on weight making for Taekwondo athletes. Can you give us a little bit more information about that?
Yeah, sure. So my kind of area of focus in everything that I do at the university, strength and conditioning, physiology, nutrition, is generally in combat sports. I have a very particular interest in Taekwondo because that's the sport that I've done personally for around 21 years now. The PhD is focused on weight making, in particular weight making practices, and then things that we can do to try and help Taekwondo athletes lose weight more efficiently and more effectively. There's been a lot of research done in combat sports in general, in particular in wrestling and judo around weight making, but I'm sure, as a lot of the guys out there listening will know, that Taekwondo is kind of unique in its weight making culture, given that we have different weight divisions for Olympic events and for non-Olympic events, and there's just not been a lot of research or a lot of information done around weight making practice in Taekwondo. So that's the whole idea. And then I suppose from a personal point of view, as a former athlete, this was something that I did, as a practice I engaged in myself, both negatively and positively. It wasn't until I came to the university and started working with a nutritionist and started to understand how to make weight efficiently. And that happened to be at the latter stages of my career. And then so it's a little bit of everything really, Spike. It's a bit of like I say, wanting to fill in a gap in the research, but then wanting to kind of answer questions for the profession as well, for coaches, for athletes, and help them to make weight more efficiently and more effectively.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, that is that my big concern. I mean, I have obviously parents who try and drop their kids down to a lower weight, and obviously I don't advise it. I mean, so what are you kind of finding anyway? What are you finding with this?
Yeah, it was, so I've completed all of the studies now, and it was kind of a 5-phase process. First thing we had to kind of do, I mean, as coaches, I'm sure we know, and as practitioners, we know there's a problem with making weight in Taekwondo, but we had to kind of prove that from a theoretical point of view. So the first study that we did was actually to conduct a questionnaire survey at a competition, and we did that at the weigh-in of a competition a couple of years ago, because typically what tends to happen, there's been a lot of surveys done examining weight making practices in combat sports, again mostly in wrestling and judo, but they tend to get done in the off season, i.e. when the athletes are not making weight, they're not engaging in these practices, so key information, thoughts, feelings, emotions might get lost. So we were really keen on doing a survey, but actually doing it at the weigh-in. So I don't know how I managed to do this, but I literally managed to grab a couple of hundred hungry souls after they've all weighed in, and get them to sit down and complete this survey and ask them some questions. I mean, a lot of them looked like they wanted to punch me in the face, because I'm sure they had bigger concerns, to be fair. But no, I mean, it was really great that we got a lot of guys in. We did that across elite divisions in cadet, junior, senior, because another thing that we wanted to do is, okay, is there a problem? But what does the problem look like between males and females? What does the problem look like between cadets, juniors and seniors? Because as we know, in cadets, there's a lot of weight categories with small gaps. When you move into junior, there's still a lot of weight categories, but the gaps increase. And then for the Junior Olympic Games, you've only got 5 categories. obviously in senior you've got less categories, bigger gaps, and then if you look at the Olympics, the biggest weight category gaps in any combat sport, including MMA.
Yeah.
So we wanted to kind of see, okay, well, what happens, from cadet to junior to senior, and kind of examine those trends. And yeah, we found some really, really interesting data. I mean, obviously the first thing we found is there's a problem. What was interesting is from cadet to junior to senior, that problem becomes more prevalent. So the amount of weight that you lose from being a cadet to a junior to a senior increases. Not only that, the practices that the senior guys engage in tend to be a lot more extreme. More dehydration, you're losing more weight through restricting food intake and dieting and things like that. But then obviously, what was interesting as well was there was some more extreme ends of the spectrum. So vomiting, using diuretics, cutting off hair.
Really?
Just some really crazy things. Again, nothing which is probably a surprise to people who are involved in the sport, because you can. I mean, I was at the President's Cup this weekend, just gone, and managed to get a video of the weigh-in, which was like a Royal Rumble event. To be fair, everyone's trying to fight to get themselves into the weigh-in room, and then
I've been at a couple of those.
and we've all seen it. We've seen guys dressed up in all of the kit running around the stadium, trying to sweat, trying to dehydrate. So yeah, there is a problem. A secondary thing was we wanted to kind of know, okay, well, who's the influence to this?
Yeah.
And again, probably unsurprisingly, the main influence or the main source of information for athletes making weight tends to be coaches. And historically, it tends to be whatever the coach has done is what they advise the player to do, which is not all. I mean, again, that was what happened to me when I was an athlete. And I look back now, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but some of the stuff I used to do was just not good, like really, really bad for health. And, really, but as you know, as a player, the only thing that matters is making that weight.
Yeah, you're right.
And then another point as well, and you alluded to this before, is that for the cadets and juniors, obviously because they're under 18, the parents tended to have a really big influence in that as well. So following on from that, we then took that information and we started doing some actual interviews with people, then trying to tease out more information. So we interviewed coaches, we interviewed parents, we interviewed athletes about, just because I suppose the survey was kind of the skeleton, and we wanted to add some meat to the bones, some context.
Yeah.
And again, as I was saying to you earlier on, it's some of the stuff that was coming out of that was really interesting from a research point of view, but then, really shocking as well from a pragmatic point of view. I think, and I think what it boiled down to, those first two studies basically showed there needs to be a level of education directed at, in particular coaches. I think the coaches need to be educated in how to advise, or not even how to advise, even direct the athlete to appropriate sources for making weight. Because I think the underestimation is that, if an athlete was ill, they'd send them to a doctor. If they were injured, they'd send them to a physio. If they're trying to make weight, which is a specialist area, they should be sending them to somebody with some expertise, or have a certain level of expertise themselves to be able to prescribe. And at the minute, that's just not happening. It's you've got well, for the want of better words, uneducated people educating athletes on how to make weight with very extreme measures. So yeah, that was kind of the first thing. And then I suppose the next three studies following on from that was kind of like, study 1 and 2 was, is there a problem? Yes, there is. And study 3, 4, and 5 was, okay, how can we help with the problem? So I've done a study looking at body composition in Taekwondo athletes. So looking at ways that we can measure, body fat and muscle and things like that. Because again, from a sports science point of view, in the institution that I work at John Moores, we use like gold standard measures called the DEXA scanner, which really allows us to nail down how much body fat, how much muscle, how much lean, how much bone tissue a person's got, and it helps us to make a really defined view of, can this person make a weight or can they not? It's kind of like the first port of call. We get a combat sports athlete, they come to us, we give them a scan, and say, for instance, they say, I want to, I weigh 67 kilos and I want to make 58, and we measure them and they've literally got, 7% body fat, then let's be honest, it's not pragmatically,
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it's possible, but
But they'll
in
lose
terms
muscle
of
as well, yeah.
well, yeah, in terms of health and performance, and it's not advisable. So we use that. But again, I think in the field, one of the most common that's very expensive. It requires specialist equipment, and it requires people to travel. So the majority of people can get access to skin folds. So what we've tried to do is go, okay, well, what does a Taekwondo athlete look like on this DEXA scanner, and then compare it to kind of skin fold measurements and come up with which is the best skin fold equation to use for a Taekwondo population, so that we can advise and say, okay, if you're not able to access this equipment, then this is useful. So that's kind of the first thing. Second thing that I was really interested as well is, because it just doesn't exist, is how much energy does a Taekwondo or the Taekwondo activities actually expend? Because if you can identify body composition, weight loss is a very simple. It's not. It's a simple equation of energy in versus energy out. So if you expend more than you intake, you will lose weight. I mean, it's more complicated than that, because you got to think of the different macronutrients and the intakes and the time and then the type and the total of those. But yeah, we did a really interesting study where we actually quantified the energetic expenditure of Taekwondo activities. So we did like a combat simulation, and I did, well, it was like a match simulation to identify how much energy you expend. And we used this really interesting device, which is like a heart rate and an accelerometer monitor, which you can just basically, it was basically at the time a glorified, kind of like the Fitbits and the Apple Watches that everybody uses these days, to try and identify. And we found that it was quite close to gold standard measures, and we were able to quantify, okay, how much energy did he expend. And then the very final study, which I've just finished, was a case study where we took a guy who habitually would compete in minus 68. So he would weigh around 73 kilos.
Okay.
Get himself down to 68, but he would literally kill himself. We interviewed him and some of the stuff that he was doing, and it was like just
And was this like kind of, did he do it over a long period, or did he do it over a very short period?
This is another thing. It was like he was doing it over a period of 2 weeks.
Wow.
2 to 3 weeks. He was doing massive dehydrations, really restricting his food intake, not really doing it the right way. So we scanned him on the machine, and we actually sat him down and said, pragmatically, you can actually make 63s. And I remember him looking at me, literally going, you're a lunatic. Like, it's I kill myself to make minus 68.
It's just his ways doing it.
68s, and we're telling him, well, actually, you could lose 10 kilos and make 63s. So we did a case study intervention where we controlled his nutrition and his training, his just everything really, in conjunction with his Taekwondo training, which was done by his own coach. And he made the weight. He made the weight safely and effectively. He actually only in the end had to dehydrate, I think, around about a kilo. So on the day he went into the sauna for 30 minutes, and that was made his weight. He refueled, and then the competition he competed in, which was the university championships, he won gold. So
brilliant.
It was a nice ending to the story. Is there a problem? What can we do to examine and help with the problem? And here's a solution to the problem. So I'm hoping to get all of those studies published over the next couple of months and get that out into the ether. So
where will that be out there? Is there anywhere we can get that, or is that's difficult?
Yeah, we'll publish, like we'll publish in academic journals. So I mean, this is the problem, obviously, with sports science, is that it tends to get, the currency for us guys is in academic literature.
Okay.
What I'm actually thinking about doing as well, though, is maybe, and again, this is maybe something I can do in conjunction with yourself.
Okay.
Going through each study and kind of just like given the basic information and the premise of, what the guys can, or what the athletes and the coaches can take away from that, and what they can use, and directing them in the right places. So yeah, I'm going to publish it in academic literature, but I mean, at the end of the day, the whole reason why I'm doing this, as a practitioner of Taekwondo is because I want it to get to the end user to be used.
So I mean, this is a future podcast by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it sounds if you're willing, that sounds like a good idea.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think like you're saying, if it's going to go into academic stuff, then it's going to be possibly your national teams and things like that, your sports scientists that were working with them. But really, the main problem is right down at grassroots, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the key. I mean, I think ultimately, it's about one of the key things from all of this is just basic education. There was a club who, a friend of mine who was a coach who asked, again, it was off because I put on Facebook some of the stuff that we'd done, and he noticed it, and he was like, could some of my guys come in, and just, get assessed and get some general advice. And I suppose it's difficult for me to think back because I was in exactly the same boat. Now I'm educated in this stuff, but these guys didn't even know basic. I mean, I'm not even talking sports nutrition. I'm talking basic nutrition. Carbohydrates, proteins, fats, when to eat, what to eat, how to eat. So exactly like you said, I think it's educating coaches on the very basic premises of fundamental nutrition for not just for performance, but also for training, just for function.
Yeah.
And then I think permeating that into the grassroots level so that they grow up with that attitude, and then when they become coaches, that then starts to seep into into their practices as well.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, it would be great. Like, I know you're saying to get it to the coaches, but I mean, to be honest, I've often found that probably getting it to the players themselves is better because some of the coaches, they have the best will in the world, but maybe it might stop there. So if we can get it to the players themselves, then that's a great thing, because obviously it'll go straight ahead to education,
Absolutely. I mean, because like I say, it's knowledge is a wonderful thing, because I look back to some of the stuff I used to do, and it is really, I kind of laugh at myself.
Yeah, I'm the same.
In terms of, what I used to do and, how uneducated I was. But at the end of the day, as they say, ignorance is bliss until you're educated. That's the key thing.
Yeah.
So no, definitely for me, I want to get this information out there. I want it to impact. I mean, obviously, especially considering these new rule changes about weigh-ins that are coming in.
Yeah, definitely. The 5% rule, is it? Is that the one you're on about?
Yeah. I mean,
let's have a chat about that.
Yeah. My general view on it is I don't think it's a good idea.
Ditto.
Yeah. I work in a lot of combat sports, so where judo at the moment have that rule.
Okay.
Have that rule instigated. So judo have had the 5% rule instigated since 2014. Because judo used to do a morning of weigh-in, and they didn't have a 5%. It was just a morning of.
Right.
They moved it to the day before because very similar to Taekwondo. I'm sure you're old enough to remember back in the day when we all used to weigh in on the morning.
Yeah.
They moved it to the day before to give the guys more of a chance to recover and rehydrate and refeed and refuel and things like that. And then what they found was, typically, if you give anybody an opportunity, the morning of, people were still making weight. You move it the day before, people are still making weight, but making weight even more. So then they bring this 5% rule in to try and say, well, if you're over 5%, you're ineligible to compete. But what they've actually found is, as with anything, you give any kind of athlete a rule, they'll find the ways to bend it as much as possible. All these guys do now is hold that 5% until after the check weigh-in's done.
So when you're talking about the 5%, what exactly are you meaning by the 5%? So they weigh in at 68, say.
So for example, if you had an athlete who was weighing in at 68, they then have a 5% re-weigh-in allowance prior to the next day, which is around about 3.4 kilos. Now, like say in judo, so for instance, if we look at it in judo, say in the lower male categories have minus 60 and minus 66. So if they have an athlete who weighs in at 60, then a percentage of the athletes the following day, so it's, WT World Taekwondo have said 33% of the athletes in the group will be reweighed in prior to the event.
Right. Okay.
And you've got a 5% allowance. So if in judo, it's a similar rule because they've kind of adopted this. I think they've adopted this from judo, where if you weigh in at 60 kilos, you've got a 3 kilo allowance. If you re-weigh in, if you're one of the selected random athletes, and you're over that 3 kilos, then you're disqualified. You're deemed unfit to compete. Now, where it's a positive thing is it is kind of encouraging guys who lose a lot of weight to move to the next category.
Yeah.
And in a sport like judo, if you look at judo, 7 weight categories in all events, including the Olympics. If you have a guy who, say, maybe comes down from 66, 67, he goes down to 60, he then, rehydrates, refuels up to 63, that's maybe not so bad.
Yeah.
But if you get a guy who's trying to come down from 70, 72 to 60, and that's too much, then it's not that much of a push for him to move up to 66 because, it's only a 6 kilo change. And probably if he's coming down from 72, he should be doing 66 anyway. He should be, So from that point of view, it's positive. Where I think we're going to struggle in Taekwondo is that the majority of the competitions that this is going to be used in are going to be the Olympic divisions. And as we know, there's only 4 divisions for males and females. So you've got 58, you've got 68, you've got 80 that are the weight-making divisions. So if you've got a guy who again, might actually be bang on 68 kilos, he's not going to compete in 68 because he knows there's going to be guys who are a lot taller, a lot heavier. So he's going to try and get to 58. But 5% of 58 is only a 2.9% allowance, which if you think of somebody who's losing 10 kilograms to get down is not a great deal of, it's not a big allowance really to allow.
2.9, did you say 2.9 kilograms?
2.9 kilograms, yeah. So if the 5% is only 2.9, so by the time he's rehydrated, he's eating a meal or anything like that, it's, that's not a lot. Yeah, it's not a huge deal to put on. Plus, on top of that as well, when you look at relativity, 5%. So in 58, the allowance would be 2.9 kilos. In 68, the allowance would be 3.4 kilos. And in 80, the allowance would be 4 kilos. Now, 1 gram of muscle glycogen and 1 milliliter of fluid, independent of body size, energetically or bioenergetically interacts in exactly the same way. So you're actually giving an advantage to the heavier guys. So for instance, if you had a guy who's 90 getting down to 80, a 4 kilo allowance is a pretty nice cushion. But if you've got a guy who's 68 getting to 58, then 2.9 is not as much of a cushion. So if you're going to do it, I'd probably maybe allow not a relative, not a percentage, but probably a kilogram limit, an absolute limit. Maybe give them, if you're over by 4 kilos or you're over by whatever, then do that. But then
depending on the weight.
Yeah, depending on the weight. But then ultimately, I think that I'm not saying this is a bad idea from the point of view of why they're trying to do it, because ultimately they're trying to do it to limit extreme weight making practices, that cause cardiac death and renal failure and a whole host of things that come with it. But if dehydration is the issue, then I think what they should probably measure is hydration status. You can get a very simple refractometer and just measure your urine status, and if it's above a certain threshold, then deem the athlete's not fit to compete, or do it in combination with weight. Do it in a combination of the two. But then another problem with Taekwondo as well is it's probably the only combat sport that doesn't have a medical.
Yeah, you know what? I've always said that. Same as for boxing and that as well. They always have a medical for it. I've never ever had it.
Every single combat sport has a medical check. Olympic wrestling, Olympic judo, Olympic boxing. They have a medical check where you checked for a whole range of things to see if you're fit to compete, and part of that is the weigh-in process. So it's kind of like they're introducing things, and we haven't got simplistic things like a medical, for example.
Just bypassing that, that's
the
a good point, actually.
Am I adverse to it because it's a bad idea to reduce weight making practices? Absolutely not. Am I adverse to it because I think it's going to encourage even worse weight making practices? Then yes, I am, because as I said to you earlier, I work with a whole range of combat sports, amateur and professional boxers, judo, wrestling athletes, MMA athletes, and you know what, Spike, I've seen it all. If you give them less categories, they still make weight. If you give them more categories, they still make weight. If you weigh them in on the morning, they still make weight. If you weigh them in the day before, they still make weight. And all I think that's going to happen with this 5% rule is you're going to have athletes making the weight, holding at 5%, and then, trying to rehydrate, or trying to re-energize with an even shorter window than they had before, which is not a good idea. So it's not a good idea. And then another thing that they've said is that they're going to weigh people in, or re-weigh 33% of the category in 30 minutes prior to the start of the competition. Now, is that, if you think about it, is that 30 minutes prior to the start of the competition? In which case, the higher seed you have, you've got an advantage.
Yeah,
because if I get reweighed in and I'm seed 1, I might not be fighting until the quarters or a round of 16 in a couple of hours time. So I've got more time. If I'm a guy who's unseeded, then I might literally be fighting 30 minutes later. So that brings that brings in an unfairness with the rule and stuff. So yeah, I think I'm going to try and speak to some of the guys on the medical commission and get their ideas behind why it's been introduced. Again, I get the the accord that they brought in for athlete welfare and athlete safety, but I think it'd be interesting to see why this is being brought in and what evidence it's being based upon, and what feasibility it's being examined. Because I think, like we said, very, very meditable to try and reduce practice, but if anything, I think it'll probably just make practice worse.
Yeah. Oh well, time will tell. Let's hope nobody gets injured in that. Due to it.
Let's see.
Yeah. So obviously we're talking about the physiology there. I mean, strength and conditioning for Taekwondo. I mean, how are you involved in a few athletes for that, or have you?
Yeah. So I've been. I mean, my kind of career progression is that when I finished competing and got into a bit of coaching, I was coaching my athletes, and very, very readily realised that what made me a better athlete was being involved in a sports science department and having access to things like strength and conditioning and nutrition and physiological testing. So I came back to university and started doing a Master of Research in Physiology, and then my main job, what really interested me was strength and conditioning. So I've been doing strength and conditioning for the past 8 years now, and I've coached a couple of Taekwondo athletes in S&C. I'm involved in the supervision of somebody who's working with the GB National Academy, who's working in physiology and strength and conditioning with those guys as well. So I've been involved in it quite extensively, and then obviously seeing the provision of how that's had to evolve as the games evolved over time. From the days of non-PSS to PSS, and then the rule changes. So I've done a fair bit.
So I mean, where would you say S&C is in Taekwondo now? I mean, what would you? I mean, I know it's a big subject in that, but
yeah. I mean, I think the big thing about strength and conditioning in Taekwondo is there's a couple of factors. First of all, it depends where you go. So I know years and years and years ago, probably the region that was ahead of the curve, in my opinion, was the Pan America region. Those guys, over at the car in La Loma and places like that. And I know there's a really good guy called Claudio Orlando who's based over in Argentina, and I know he's worked with a lot of Pan Am teams, and they were doing some absolutely fantastic S&C stuff around, heavy lifting for force production. They were doing a lot of plyometrics and elastics and all that sort of stuff. It was really good. As the games changed and as the games evolved, the requirements for how you'd implement S&C has changed as well. But the biggest caveat in S&C, and I think the place I saw this most was in the Asian region, in places like Korea and Chinese Taipei, is that they're very adverse to doing it, because I think a lot of coaches think if you do strength and conditioning, if you do weight training, you're going to put on muscle mass, and that's going to be, that's going to be a problem.
Detrimental to it, yeah.
It's going to make you slower. You put more muscle mass on, you're going to find it harder to make weight and things like that. So in terms of where we're at with it, first and foremost, there's not been a lot of research or information done in it. I think everywhere I've been, practices are very, very different. Like say you go to a place like Korea, a lot of the S&C they do, it's very machine based. It's very single joint, very single muscle, because they're all terrified about putting muscle mass on. You go to Pan America, they tend to do a lot of plyometrics, a lot of jumps, explosive stuff, things with elastics. But there's questions around given the game doesn't really require the degree of explosivity that it did back in the day.
Yeah.
Do you really need to do that anymore? So, I think, digressing anyway, going back to your question, the honest answer is nobody knows.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we know what the characteristic of an elite taekwondo or a successful taekwondo athlete is these days.
Yeah.
Again, we can all say, you want somebody to be tall, long limbs, you want them to have, very good hip strength to be able to hold the leg to score high section. But then obviously now we've got the rule where you're allowed to push. So there needs to be a certain element of actual strength to be able to push and challenge in the clinch. The ring is getting smaller and smaller and smaller as well. So you have to engage more. You have to be stronger. So, I mean, my point of view is, a couple of things that I want to do is dispel probably a couple of myths. I mean, first and foremost, lifting weights will not put muscle on you unless you're doing a couple of other things. To grow muscle, you need to, number one, be doing resistance-based training. You need to be stimulating the muscle. 2, you need to be taking on an adequate amount of protein, which tends to be a lot more than what Taekwondo players generally would eat. It's way above the recommended guidelines. And 3, you need to be in a positive energy balance. So you actually need to be intaking a lot of calories.
Okay, yeah.
If you're not doing those 3 things, it's bioenergetically, physiologically impossible to put on large bulks of muscle mass. It's not, so it's not like one day I'll walk into the gym and lift a barbell, and then the next day, I look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Unfortunately, it's not the way it works. So that's one myth that I'd love to dispel amongst coaches. Don't be scared that it's going to make your athletes heavier. In terms of making your athletes slower, when good resistance-based training is done in conjunction with other things like plyometrics, like specific Taekwondo training, if you think of the basic premise of power, the equation for power is force times velocity. If you increase the athlete's potential to generate force, which is done through resistance-based training, and the potential to increase velocity, which is obviously done through Taekwondo training, you're going to get a more powerful athlete.
Yeah.
So, my main message would be do resistance-based training, engage in it, encourage your athletes to do it as well, because it'll make them more efficient, it'll make them better, all round in terms of being able to perform the game.
But not singular jointed.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, again, it's very, very, very context specific. You've got a whole, the beauty about S&C is it's such a wide, diverse discipline. You've got, Olympic lifting based movements, which are very prevalent in CrossFit now. So cleans and snatches and things like that, which can have benefit to Taekwondo athletes in certain contexts. You've got key fundamental movements, things like squats and deadlifts, bench presses, pulls, pushes, things like that, which again can be very beneficial. There are contexts as well. If you have imbalances between muscles, between limbs, where single joint or assistance based lifts are important. What I'd say is that you want to try and get a good all round mix of everything. So you want to be doing multi joint compound movements, things like squats, because one, you're putting the body under load. It has to stabilize the load, which again is useful to a Taekwondo athlete. And then you're doing a multi-joint movement, which is basically what a Taekwondo kick is. But then there are times you'll do single joint movements as well. So I think it's very contextual. I think again, it needs to be based around much as anything. If I'm working with a Taekwondo athlete, the first thing that I do is perform a needs analysis from a point of view of what's the previous injury history.
Yeah. And would you do like a movement screen as well, or?
Yeah, you do, like, basically you get as much information as possible prior to putting anything in place. So movement screenings, force velocity profiling, strength assessments. You ask a lot of information from the coach. So is there a certain technical, tactical style of play? Is there a dominant leg? Did he need to be very highly conditioned? Are they a lot more passive? Are they a lot more aggressive? Do they have an injury history? If they're always having knee injuries, ankle injuries, then there's certain things you can do around that. So, it is really context specific. I don't think there's a one program fits all for Taekwondo.
Yeah.
Because as you know, male players, female players, heavier players, lighter players, taller, shorter. It's very, I don't think there's I don't think there's a tactical model that fits every player, Taekwondo player on the planet, just like there's not an S&C program that fits every player on the planet. But yeah, I think it's definitely something that people should be engaging in. But yeah, the old school of, leg extensions, leg flexions, machine-based stuff, we want to try and get away from that and do more compound-based lifting and things.
So, I mean, obviously, like I've spoken to, or I've interviewed a few of the elite athletes from Team GB and also a couple of coaches from around the world as well. And I think because of the intensity of all the competitions around the world now, with the Grand Prix and things like that, they find it very difficult to, obviously there's not so much of the periodization, it's just about being the most robust athlete they can be now. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, this is something, if you think many years ago, there were few major championships, there was large blocks between, or, large periods of time between competitions where you could really do a focused periodized program in strength and conditioning around the Taekwondo training and make athletes stronger and more robust. I'm totally on board with the fact that the competition calendar is just ridiculous. So I think the periodization of training needs to be maybe not competition to competition, but maybe with a view of, we're just going to make this athlete stronger over a period. We're going to make this athlete more explosive over a period and things like that. But again, I think that boils back down to, and this is what so like I said earlier, I'm supervising a student who's working at the moment, and they're trying to characterize and find what does an elite Taekwondo athlete in today's game actually look like. What are they comprised of? Is it stability? Is it strength? Is it, what are the physiological profile of the athlete? And then not only that, they've done a study where they've looked at what's the physiological characteristics of competition, because again, there was a lot of studies done back a few years ago, when, again, prior to PSS, looking at what the physiological characteristics of a Taekwondo competition look like. But now, as we know, there's more activity, the ring is smaller, there's more play to the high section, you're wearing PSS, so the activity of the sport has changed as well. I think exactly like you said, you need to be a lot more fitter and robust in order to play like that, more than you had to be maybe potentially even back many years ago. So I mean, from a generalist point of view, one thing that I definitely encourage people to do that Taekwondo athletes don't do, because they think it's detrimental to performance, is aerobic based training. If you think of a typical Taekwondo match, yes, it's 6 minutes. Yes, each round is 2 minutes, so it's very, as people would say, anaerobic. But you're doing multiple matches across a very extensive long day, which is really going to stress the aerobic system. So if you think about boxers, amateur and pro boxers, they do a hell of a lot of aerobic based. They do boxers runs, they go out
skipping,
and they do so, as well as I tend to see a prevalence in Taekwondo where everything is very much, it's all specific. It's all done on pads. It's sparring. It's high intensity. It's interval based, which is great. But you need to build the engine to go with that as well. So I think it's difficult to implement, especially at the elite end, because the fixture list, I suppose, is so congested. But I think rather than periodizing it from competition to competition, just because there's so many of them, an S&C coach, if they're given the freedom, so just sit down and look at an athlete and go, okay, they need to be stronger. So in between, we're going to focus on strength. This might not bleed into performance in the shorter term, but in the longer term, it's going to lead to a more robust athlete further down the line.
Yeah. So I mean, would you say that then the up and coming athletes, like your cadets, like your juniors, they should be doing a more
100%
periodized to make them as strong
as possible,
as fit as they can be, so that by the time they get to the senior level, where there is no time for the periodization, they should be at the best level they are. Yeah.
You know what, mate? You've absolutely hit the nail on the head. The time to build the base, to build the foundations, because with strength and conditioning, building an athlete's just like building a house. You want strong foundations before you build each level. If you can get your cadet athletes or junior athletes engaging in a good strength and conditioning program that builds the potential of base strength, base power, and because at the end of the day, they've got the time, the ability to do that. by the time they get to a senior level, they'll have that base, and then it's just a case of maintenance. Then it's about maintaining, or as you know, being a bit more specific. You're able to specify then, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we could encourage people to do is really work. But again, I think the people who are in control of that process are are coaches who are outside of maybe national team systems and are not so educated. So they think, well, if I do that, I'm going to put muscle on them, or
you're going to make them
they're going to get slower,
stunt their growth.
You're going to stunt their growth.
Yeah,
things like that. So but no, that would be the time. That would certainly be the time to really start doing it, because you'd build an athlete who is so strong and robust, and less potential to get injured as well from that congested period later on. That'd be ideal.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. So, from a Taekwondo point of view, obviously, we've talked about your job and physiology and your strength and conditioning. I mean, what are you still active with coaching then? Are you?
Yeah, I am. So I've been doing Taekwondo for about 21 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd formerly competed as an athlete. Not ashamed to say, not a very successful one. So
I think you're being nasty to yourself. You were pretty good.
Yeah, no.
What I remember anyway.
Yeah, competing at an okay level. So in international. Did moderately well. I did well at junior. Didn't do so great at senior. But yeah, no, I stopped early. And started coaching because I kind of found that I had quite a bit of a passion to coach. So I was coaching quite a few junior guys back in the day, and did quite well with them. And then I've been involved with a couple of national teams previous to that. And then currently at the moment, I've been working with an athlete who's just recently started or is recently competing for the Indian national team. So I'm going to be supporting her over the next few competitions, over the next few years leading towards Tokyo, because she's hoping, if she can, to qualify through for that. So yeah, so still active. And then I'm also coaching at club level as well. I coach. There's a local club around here that I coach for, so I'm still coaching some cadets and some juniors and stuff. So yeah, a little bit of a spectrum really, from just low national level right up to major international level as well.
And how do you find, are the students there? Is their buy-in pretty good from your knowledge and that? Do they listen to you on the hydration side of things?
Yeah. So the athletes who I'm working with at the I suppose the more international spectrum is very that's something that we talk about all the time. I'd help her with her weight making, and again, it's funny you mentioned it's something we're going to sit down and do is strength and conditioning, and we haven't managed to get that. I mean, she engages in it now, but we want to change it and start implementing some things. But she's literally been competing every couple of weeks, so we haven't had the chance to implement. So after this next, she's got one more competition, and then she gets a bit of a block where we'll be able to start implementing some things. But yeah, even the the cadets and the juniors, and it seems to be every level. And then I get phone calls, I get messages. I think there's a genuine interest out there. It's just finding ways or mediums to get it out there, to give the information to the people, because I do feel sorry for a lot of coaches and athletes these days, because where back when I used to compete, there was an absence of information.
Yeah.
I think, as we know now through social media, there's an abundance of information, and it's probably sifting through what's useful and what's absolute rubbish. Because I think one of the things you see this all the time on Twitter and Instagram, and everybody's a nutrition expert, everybody's a training expert, everybody knows this or knows that, and it's not that you have to go away and do a PhD or be qualified. There's plenty of people out there who are qualified via experience, but it's knowing which sources of information are reliable and which sources aren't. And that's something, like I say, with my kind of passion for Taekwondo and involvement in Taekwondo, that's something that I want to kind of get out there and do. So no, there's definitely a thirst for information out there.
That's good. Yeah.
Not just from a tactical perspective. I think people are starting to realise that it's a sport of it's very biomechanical in terms of the tactics, the way you need to kick and put your leg in certain positions and movements. It's very physical in the sense that you've got to be able to fight within the clinch. You've got to be able to engage and have good conditioning and be strong. And then obviously you've got to make weight, so you need to have a good understanding of nutrition as well. So yeah, for sure, there's definitely an interest.
That's good. Yeah, that's brilliant.
A lot of the questions I get asked is, if it comes to S&C, for example, what should I be doing? And again, I think like it's not that guys with expertise are fobbing people off. As we said earlier, to really design not just a bespoke program, but an appropriate program for someone, there's a lot of information you need to know to be able to design that. Or, people say in terms of nutrition, what should I eat to make weight? And you're kind of like, well, first of all, I need to know, can you make the weight? What's your body composition and what's your, what's your rest and metabolic rate? And then we can start thinking about diets and things like that. So probably the best piece of advice that I could give to people is if you know or have access to local university that has a sports science department, or if there's anybody locally that does body composition testing, that does strength and conditioning, because the great thing about universities is you've got plenty of young, willing, hungry students looking for experience. I know there's a couple of clubs around the UK now who've actually got S&C coaches who are coming in from university, and the great thing for them is that they get the experience of working with athletes, and then obviously the athletes reap the benefits. So if you want advice, go to a university and see, because they're dotted all over the country. Do they have a degree in sports science? Do they have a degree program in strength and conditioning or nutrition? And are there any expertise that you can tap into? Because a lot of these places will give you placement students to come and do, to come and, like say, we've got a couple of clubs coming into John Moores over the next couple of weeks to get some nutrition seminars off our MSc sports nutrition students.
It's brilliant, eh?
Yeah, it's all for free. It doesn't, there's no payment needed or anything like that. But yeah, so I don't think there's those guys who are kind of looking for the holy grail. Okay, what exercises should I be doing, and what information, what movement should I be doing? It's not as simple as that. It needs to be bespoke to you, because you're very different. Even the guys who you've interviewed, if you look at the guys in the GB Academy, one athlete to another, they're all on different programs based around what they specifically need.
Which is much better than it used to be.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, much
exactly,
better,
it's kind of like try and the internet is useful as well. So I know previously with a colleague, a friend of mine, Dave Walsh, we tried to start a website a couple of years ago called the Taekwondo Coach. So there was articles on there about training and physiology and nutrition, and just to give basic info. I still think it exists as well. So there's some useful information on that. But if you can get involved with anybody locally and try and tap into their expertise, that'd be my advice.
I suppose universities are probably, a lot of the time we're worried about going to universities because we don't want to waste our time, but they're looking for people to test. So it's it's a win-win for both people, really, isn't it?
Exactly that. If any, so like I say, I've been approached by the local clubs here about nutrition. I've set them up with students from the MSc, S&C. If we had any guys who were interested in strength and conditioning, we've got an MSc program in strength and conditioning. So there's guys who'd be willing to be involved in that. So I think it's just about reaching out to the expertise. Again, I think another, probably, and this is just my opinion, this isn't fact, but probably the national governing bodies have got a bit of responsibility of maybe creating an education platform for coaches and athletes, and whether that be workshop, seminar series, a website, even a website with basic instruction, that could be pretty useful, because
they've got a duty of care, haven't they?
Yeah, because like you said before, if you engage with the grassroots, the cadets, the juniors, and get them doing that stuff, so they don't have to be doing it to an international Olympic standard level, because that's what national teams are for. But build a good base, a good foundation, then you're making the job a lot easier down the line. So a bit of a double edge. I think it's a little bit of the coaches actively going out and trying to seek help, but then probably the NGBs, creating platforms or creating portals of information for the coaches and athletes to be able to access.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. So I've got one question that I obviously ask every single person I interview, and I'm hoping that you can answer this well.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. So what is it that makes Taekwondo different to other martial arts, and how would you describe what it takes to be a black belt?
Well, good questions. Well, what makes it different to martial arts is I think it's just got its completely own culture. Um, Obviously, if you think about like we said before, weight making is different to other martial arts, other combat sports. The fact that you use PSS in competitions makes it different to other combat sports. Even the Pumse now, the Pumse. Very recently, we had the beach championships. I think it's just a fantastically evolving modern martial art. I think I really enjoy seeing the spectrum of it all now. I know there's a lot of guys out there who say that it's starting to lose its roots a little bit, and in certain contexts I agree with that. There's nothing better than pure traditional Taekwondo as a martial art, and I don't think that should be. This again, this is my opinion. I don't think that's something that should be lost.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that it's so diverse is what makes it unique to me. You can be involved in if you're a fighter. You can be involved in the competition side of things, a whole host of levels. If obviously you can compete in Pumse if that's for you as well. And yeah, it's just so diverse. That's what makes it really enjoyable for me. And again, Pumse is something that I've always been interested in getting involved in retirement. Something a little bit later on down the line. So I think that again, that's what makes it interesting. It doesn't matter what age. From as young as young can be to as old can be. Everybody's got there's something that offers everybody.
Yeah.
And then I suppose for your second question, what makes a good black belt is a true martial artist from a point of view of trying to perfect whatever it is that you're doing. Whether that be pure martial arts, trying to perfect technique, trying to perfect movements, whether it be in sport, in competition, trying to perfect the technical, tactical elements of your game. Pumse, trying to perfect the movements and the choreography and everything. It's so yeah, probably what makes a black belt to me is the obsession in your craft. Being meticulous and being religious in whatever it is that you're doing, being the best that it can be for you as an individual, and not accepting second best. Not comparing your best to anybody else's, because your best might not be as good as somebody else, and it might be way better than others. So that sort of striving for perfection. That constant I suppose what it's always been. Trying to go full circle. And become a master of your craft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, excellent. I like it. Yeah. It's a good answer. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So, Carl, how can people get in touch with you? Is there an easiest way to get in touch? Are you happy enough for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, probably the easiest way is if people want to get in touch on Facebook, they can just add me on that. They can send me messages. They can get in touch with me on Messenger. So it's just Carl Evans on Facebook. So if anyone's got any info, anyone wants to ask any questions, I'll, like I say, pretty busy at the moment, but I'll always get back in touch with everybody.
Okay.
And then like I say, what I'm going to try and do, it's a bit of a process of elimination. Is once I've because I'm in the middle of writing the PhD up and doing a lot of work that we've done, which is pretty time consuming at the moment, and working into the wee small hours of the night pretty much every night. But yeah, once I've got that submitted and got it finished, I'm going to try and get this out there, and whether that be through yourself, Spike, and doing some more podcasts, or whether that be creating websites, or trying to work with the NGB. I know it's taken a long time, and there's a few people getting frustrated because they want the information now, but I'm going to try my best if I can to get it out on maybe social media, websites, different platforms.
It'll be worth the wait.
Yeah,
no pun intended.
Hopefully, hopefully, and then But in the meantime, if anyone wants to get in touch, they can. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. People can just get in touch that way.
Carl Evans, right? Well, what I'll do is I'll put the links on the website as well for the podcast, and people can get you there as well. All right,
sure,
and that's great.
No problem.
And hopefully we can do a follow-up interview, and definitely put stuff across. But I think you're right. I think the more the more ways that the information is put out there, then the easier it is for people to access it. So I'm certainly happy to help with that situation as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, if anyone does have any, if there's kind of like a common theme, so if anyone, I don't know if you've got if people can contact you. So if people off the back of the podcast want to get in touch and say, can I discuss this, or can I give information about that? I'm more than happy to
brilliant
to put the information out there for sure.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Carl.
No worries. No, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure.
Yeah, we'll be in touch again soon. Okay, take care.
That's great. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
So if you'd like to hear more interviews about Taekwondo, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment on iTunes. Also, you can check out our website on www.focusontaekwondo.com for all the links and more information on the podcast.